suppose you need to hear me. Hello. Another story time with Sarah. I pressed the record and I wasn't quite ready, but let me get myself situated here. So this is part 2 of going over the 0Fs. Splendidly brief. I think I put blissfully brief on stuff because that was something I was contemplating naming it. And then it wasn't that. So if you see that written, just know that that's because it was that at one point. And I'm just terrible with names. So there's that. How are we looking? Probably not decent. Here. I mean, I've got pants on, but that's asking a lot of people nowadays. You got your pants on? All right. All right. I'm going to sit and hopefully you can see my head because I can't see what you're seeing right now. Usually I do. Usually I can see that, but not right now. All right. Part 2. Here we are, the 0F Splendidly Brief Beginner's Guide to Psychic, Intuitive Mediumship, and Healing Development. Part 1, we looked at the introduction where I kind of rolled you through that just to give you a basic overview of what this e-guide is about. We also talked about some of the foundational pieces to start reframing how you understand soul abilities. I hope this isn't crazy looking here. I don't know if that's going to mess with things with that reflecting off the camera. Ugh, completely ready for this. Completely ready. So we reframed your understanding of your soul abilities being your birthright. These are things that you are born to tap into. And there are reasons why it seems foreign to us. But the fact of the matter is, it catches your attention, but we easily dismiss it. So we're looking now at our culture. Here we are in the second part of that section. Believing you've had a psychic experience is more common than you think. So know that you're not alone if you feel like you've had instances that maybe made you think, was that a psychic experience? Again, there's psychic. I'm a terrible, terrible linguistic sayer. Oh, real quick, today, hope you grabbed your cup of tea, but today we are going with the Pepe's cup that has my coffee in it. I'm actually drinking a locally roasted coffee, which I've never tried before. I usually go with like a Starbucks, but one of my things that I've been vowing this holiday season is to buy local. I think there's a lot behind it that comes back to you individually. So if not because you're supporting people that you see and live in your community, depending on what you do, that money could come right back around to you faster than if you're spending money with big box stores or big box online stores. So there's that. Pepe's Cup. This is one of the things I brought back from Key West. I went on vacation this year. First time since an adult going on vacation. It was a nice time. And so I got my Pepe's Cup in Old Key West since 1909. Cafe and Steakhouse, 806 Caroline Street. They're open every day. Brought to you by Pepe's. A fairly good place for quite a long while. Pepe's. I think I had their steak. I think I did. I can't remember. I ate a lot of things down there. Anyway, benefits to using your soul abilities. Why Who cares? Well, you should care because it helps define your experience here on Earth and makes it a much bigger place than you realize. You could be experiencing your life in a much bigger way. And I'm not talking about just your energy is connected with their energy and everybody's in. I'm talking about like how you experience your life could be a much grander experience. Your possibilities could be seemingly impossible, at least right now. And set your expectations for what's about to go down. So there's a lot of things that we have been taught about how to exist in this life, about how you have been told what you can do and how to go about doing that. And once you start exploring the spiritual world, we're doing that via getting to know your soul abilities. Everything will change. Those rules that you learned, that you're guided into, that you've been bumpered around with, those rules are going to be busted apart. In some ways, you're like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm free. But in other ways, you're like, but wait, that's how I make sense of things. That's how I base my decisions off of. And then you kind of have to relearn how to do things. But in a lot of ways, it's natural. It's natural how you navigate the world once you break those physical world rules. So we go into the physical world versus the soul world, and we define the physical world as the common reality that we share. For the most part, we agree to. There are some gray areas that are acceptable to not agree with, but then there are other places where it's unacceptable to disagree. You know what I mean? The physical world is also the world of the ego. It's based on social structure. Social structure needs everybody to have their ego, and the ego makes sure that you get yours. That's what capitalism is all about. You get yours. Of course, you need things, right? You can't exist on this planet without having food and water and clothing and shelter. Some of these things are relationships. Some of it's identity. I'm thinking about Maslow's triangle, which is one of my big kind of things that I go off on. But there's a lot to our physical world reality that's unnecessary. And that actually places a lot of burden on us and holds us back from a lot of things. But keeping us in place is at the core of the physical world rules. The soul world is based on you having the ability to navigate on your own, to have trust in yourself, in your own feeling and understanding. The soul world is you in control, you realizing that you're in control. The soul world is being okay when things don't go right. Because what is valued isn't necessarily the outcome. What's valued is the experience, the journey, and the relationships. And as long as you stay true to your mission and your purpose, and a sensibility that what is really important is just feeling good, which is really simple to say, and almost kind of daft to imagine that that's like, how is that going to be sustained my whole life? Like, what are you talking about? As long as you can find a little piece of joy in everything you do, then you should be good. That sets the energy, it sets the tone. And so the physical world versus the soul world. The soul world is based on communication with the higher self, communication with source, God, whatever you want to call it. And it's all within your reach right now. You're like, I haven't been taught the things. I don't know. You've already listened to it. You've already communicated with it. You just don't know how you do or to the extent that you can do that. That's where you're at. Okay. All right. So now we're going to get into the soul senses. This is how you take in the soul worlds. Like the physical world, you have your senses, and then how you take in and understand the world around your physical being. Well, this is taking in the soul world and how it exists around your soul being. It's kind of funny. Then we're going to talk about soul abilities. These are more specific and using concepts that are already popular. And I say it like that because when it comes to having a conversation about these kinds of things, there's a limited vocabulary. And I almost wish I could make up my own vocabulary about how this works. But creating a new vocabulary is understanding the evolution of understanding of these kinds of things. But I don't want to get too heavy with that because I really want to cover the basics. I don't want to get you caught up on stuff. Then we're going to talk about source, God, the divine being, whatever. I think we'll see where we're at right there, because actually the meditation one we should probably save for the next video so that we can do a meditation. Oh, I like that. We do a meditation. Okay. So that's what we're going to cover. Let's get into it. Soul senses. So I use the term soul senses, which is what I will use throughout the guide. But this term is interchangeable with other terms you may have heard, including psychic senses, mental senses, metasenses, and the clairs. I know you've heard that term before. Just look at the amount of terms for the same thing. This drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. I need a Pepe break here. Pepe. It drives me crazy. I wish there was more cohesion. I don't know. In the terminology and stuff, because I feel like this is really what's one factor in holding this stuff back is the terminology used. But I feel like using a different term will confuse people because that's what they know. So that's what I got to connect with, is using that term. But I almost want to be like, stop perpetuating the madness. Okay. Anyway, moving along. Think of the concept and utilization of your soul senses the same as your physical senses. So you use your sense of touch, taste, smell, hearing, and sight to identify and make sense of the physical world around your physical being, your body. The soul senses have the same purpose, but for making sense of the soul world. When you utilize your soul senses, you actually have a wider range of senses to use than the 5 physical senses that you are used to, but some are pretty close. Becoming familiar with a few of these terms will make the introduction to the soul world seem more relatable. and within possibility for you. Understanding these meanings will help you define, verbalize, and conceptualize your experiences in order to see the repetition and patterns of your abilities and skills. Here's where we start interchanging the terms soul senses and clairs because they are synonymous. And the only reason why we interchange it is because clair is part of the words. But commonly you will hear people say the clairs, which are the soul senses. The clairs are what you use to make sense of the soul world, the communication that's coming through. I'm going to expand upon this a little bit, but first I just want to get through this here. Let's focus on some primary clairs for you to get familiar with first. This will help you ease into conceptualizing the soul senses. So first is clairvoyance, clear seeing. The soul sense of seeing. You see imagery in your mind's eye or outside of you within the physical world. This is a dominant soul sense for a lot of people. Clairaudience, clear hearing, the soul sense of hearing. Some say it's that ringing in your ears. This is a more dominant soul sense for people as well. Clear empathy or clear empathy. This soul sense is the ability to feel others' emotion, but it feels like your own. Like you can't tell the difference. Claircognizant is clear knowing. This soul sense is simply just knowing information, as if information just appears out of nowhere as a thought in your head. And here's a thought that just went through my head. I've gone through this guide so many times, and I know I'm going to be reading this to you and come across like some sort of error, like grammatical, or if the word's spelled wrong, or it's missing punctuation. So I might have a moment if I come across that. But anyway, let's get back to the subject. All right. So again, soul senses are taking in information in different ways. So when I'm taking in information from this cup, let's use physical senses. I can feel the cup with my hand. It's smooth. It's got a smooth texture and it's heavy. I can smell the cup and it smells like old coffee. I can taste it and it tastes like old, cold, bitter coffee. I seriously need to refill my cup. You can see the cup and you see the blue, you see the text, you see the ceramic. Where am I? I hear it. It doesn't sound like anything. So I'm using my multiple physical senses to take in the information that my body is taking in through the nerves, right? Everything's nerves. So the light is refracting into my eye and nerves are being activated to take in information about this cup. The nerves in my hands are taking in information and are able to distinguish what this feeling is based on the vocabulary of feel, of how my body knows feel. Again, I smell. That activates nerves in my olfactory. I don't know if that's exactly how that you would say that, but it triggers nerves. It goes into my brain. It makes sense of what I'm experiencing based on the past. Or if it's a new smell, I'll probably be confused and attach its smell to something I already am familiar with. Sifting through the library of hundreds of thousands of smells that I have already experienced and been able to label. Okay. So looking at the soul senses, it's hard for humans to kind of conceptualize this And I think this is the first step in the process of how do I experience this? It's all internal. In some ways, there are physical feelings related to using your soul senses that have a name. Some of the things I've experienced, I didn't know exactly what it would be called or what Claire it relates to. So I think there's lots out there. There's just so many words, so many phrases that are out there to begin with. So you're kind of going off of that. But so let's kind of take this Claire by Claire here. Actually, let me go back to soul senses have the same purpose, but for making sense of the soul world. I think that's understood by now. One thing that I did mention here is when you utilize your soul senses, you actually have a wider number of senses to use than the 5 physical senses you are used to, but some are pretty close. So you have a soul sense of actual physical feeling. So it's almost like I can feel in my hands that cup. And it can even be identified, not so much that I feel a sensation of a cup in my hands. And actually, that is a sense that I've experienced before, is the feeling of how much space something takes up. Could I use my hands to understand that information, to make sense of that information, for that information to come to me? I don't think so. I think it's something that's understood that sort of bypasses that physical sensation of the hands and just goes right to your brain. So think of it like the soul senses bypass the physical ways that you sense the world, but still use that navigation to understand the references you've built. So like I said with the smell, so think of how many thousands of smells you can identify. You've smelled it, you have a name for it. Oh, that smells like popcorn. Oof, that's an intoxicating smell. Oh, I gotta have popcorn now. One that I used to experience with something that's not listed here is waking up to the smell of banana bread. Like, that smell. You know that smell. That smell gets you excited. Well, it gets me excited. So that is a part of my referencing library. And when I use my soul senses, sometimes that piece of information is tapped. The smell of banana bread. Is it something I actively search out? Is it something where I'm going, let me focus on my sense of smell and see what comes? Usually not when it comes to doing a reading. But in the case of waking up smelling banana bread, I was dreaming and woke up to that smell. So it wasn't like I was going out of my way to activate this Claire sense. It just kind of happens. And that's the key to opening up, which is something we're going to come to later, and taking in information is really just allowing the information to pop in and really not directing your attention in any particular place. So 5 is becoming familiar. What was the other thing? The wider number of senses. I feel like I went off on a tangent there. So it does seem like that there's this library of referencing you've experienced, and this is how your experience of this lifetime is completely different than any other person before, during, or after you, right? And so your referencing is going to be different than everybody before, during, and after you. And so with that, it makes you very unique in how you are able to reference things that come through. The other thing with referencing is what you experience could have something tied to it that would be different for other people. One example I use is seeing the image of an apple. You've seen an apple before. You're imagining one right now. So what is it with this apple that you connect with other things? What did I just say? When I say apple, what do you think of? Do you think of teachers? Do you think of pie? Do you think of a just delicious fruit? Are you thinking red apple? Are you thinking green apple? Are you thinking yellow apple? Who gets yellow apple? Get out of here. I think of something tied to a memory. When I was growing up, I grew up in a town that had an apple orchard, and we had apple fests. And so I remember the apple orchard and pressing cider with fresh grown delicious apples. So that's where my brain goes with apples. Where it goes for you is based on your connections with apples. Did you grow up on an orchard? No. Did you grow up somewhere where there weren't apples? Then maybe you don't have a lot of connection to anything to do with apples. It's all about the experiences you've had, the memories you've made, the emotions connected. That's the information that's going to be drawn from to give you information when it comes to what does it mean? Okay? I feel like I'm going off on a tangent, but stay with me here. Because the one other thing I wanted to mention with this particular line of saying a wider number of senses used in the 5 physical senses is that there are ways that information is taken in that are beyond these 5 physical senses. So one example is claircognizance, which was something that was introduced as a term just a little while ago. Claircognizance is just knowing. I just know this. It just popped in my head and I know it. That doesn't really have a physical comparison. So when I explain that something just popped in my head and it's just information that I know, it's hard to relate to that because our body needs sensation in order for our, nerves to initiate the messaging process. So it's kind of strange when you come across something that's like, I just know this. Or try to think of another one that's not related. Let's see, a clear. Now, I didn't want to get too bogged down with clairs, with the different kinds of clairs. I have a huge list on my website in the blog section. So you can check that out at nextgenmedium.com in the public blog, I call it, because anybody can take a look at that stuff. But there's a lot there. Let's see. Wait. Yeah. Okay. All right. So here's another one. Just thought of this. Don't go away. Oh, this computer. It's getting to the point where the battery, once it gets down to a certain point, it just gives up. And not the point that it used to. Like it would give me a warning, and now it just doesn't. Oh, this baby's been with me for 2 years. I love you. Love you. So one clair that I could also bring forward that isn't something we're going to go over here in the guide is what's it called? I forget what it's called. Clairsentience. So this is something that took me a while to figure out what to call it. And I still don't even know if clairsentience is the correct way. Just because definitions are so broad. And it's like, well, I guess this fits. So I sometimes feel pain or discomfort that other people feel. And this happens when people are feeling under the weather, or something happens and they had an accident. I also feel it with mediumship stuff. So I can tell when someone has had a stroke, because while I'm doing the reading and I'm connecting with the energy, visualizing the person, I get a sensation that comes around. And if they had a stroke, I'll feel it on one side of my head. It's almost like a headache coming about. And there has been a time when it was so intense, it was making me think there was something wrong with me. Now, why didn't I think something was wrong with me? Because as time passed, the feeling went away. As it was identified that someone had a traumatic incident involving their head, it was almost instantaneously gone. It's almost like as soon as I'm able to identify that as belonging to someone else, that disappears. Another time I experienced this was mediumship reading, where I was connecting with someone's aunt or grandmother. This was a long time ago. And I was feeling almost like my leg was being squeezed near the calf. With that sensation in my leg, I also had a visual of veins being squeezed. To which, I said, it feels like, there's like a blood clot or some sort of restriction going on in the leg. To which the woman said, my aunt had or my grandmother had varicose veins. So that explains that sensation I was feeling. As soon as it was identified, boom, it was gone. It's like as soon as I acknowledge what's going on and it's communicated, it's passed along as information, it'll disappear. Okay, so that's something that you don't necessarily experience with a physical body, other than you actually have varicose veins or you actually have a traumatic accident and you're feeling that pain. And I live this life sometimes thinking, is this my problem or is this someone else's problem? And I pay attention to who I live with and I go, you know what? That person's feeling under the weather. That's why I feel like crap right now. Or maybe I am under the weather. And then I got to just wait it out and see what happens. So there's that. And maybe you understand what that is. Or maybe you're just realizing, wait a second, am I taking on symptoms that other people are experiencing that are around me? This is all part of the conversation. This is how it works. All right. Wow, this is taking a really long time. Understanding these meanings will help you define, verbalize, conceptualize your experiences in order to see the repetition and patterns of your abilities and skills. So I will say that when I first started doing meditations and started doing readings, I would document what I would experience. And I think in that way, I was able to look back and reflect and piece together how what I was experiencing, that it actually had a term that went along with it. And then it made me feel like, all right, see, there's a word for that. There is still some times where it was like, clairaudience is a perfect one. I have never experienced clairaudience. I wish I could. I feel like that would really change the dynamics of a reading. But I have no idea what that one is. I've never experienced that in a reading. I've experienced it falling asleep, but part of me is like, I don't believe that's mediumship. I think my brain's just firing off stuff, but who knows? Like, I'm open to that possibility, right? But I don't know clairaudience. I wish I did. And there's other things that took me a while to kind of not fit my experiences into, but to see if that fit my experience. So that's another key. Don't make it fit where it doesn't fit. And maybe you don't have a word to explain it. There's a possibility there too. So I gave you 4 clairs to focus on. And the reason why is because I think these are the most common and easy to identify with. And from my own experience, except for the clairaudience, which apparently a lot of people can use except for me, I think are easily accessible. What is it? What's the word? Accessible. That's the word. That's the word I'm looking for. So when we go into meditation and we start drawing in the information that you're receiving, don't necessarily pay attention to, okay, is what I'm experiencing clairvoyance? Like, what's the word for this? It's all about just taking in the experience. But when you come out of the experience, do some documentation, which will come up later, no doubt. Diggity, no doubt. So that you can assess after and say, okay, so this had a lot of visualization, and I think clairvoyance is a big one for me. Being able to put words to what you're experiencing really does feel like validation. But also you start connecting, like, that's where I go to get my information. We're going to get more into that imagination place as that place to go to get information. We'll get there. Don't worry about it. Just take in the information and start kind of building how to understand this world. All right, let's get into soul abilities. And so, yeah, I mean, in the book, I named it the soul abilities: intuitive abilities, psychic abilities, mediumship abilities, healing abilities. Is this all your soul is capable of doing? Absolutely not. Is this what I want to focus on? Yeah. One of the reasons why I chose these is because more broadly, with what people understand now, I wouldn't say on a societal level. I would say if you're interested in this kind of stuff, these terms are understood. So these are terms, these are abilities that I think are more common for people who are looking to know a little bit more. Are they deep diving, wanting to go to school for this stuff, or experts for 20 years? These are the only 4. No. But this is a place to start. That's really how I look at this. So soul abilities, let's read the text. Soul abilities are how you work directly with energy messaging, specifically called psychic skills, intuitive skills, healing abilities, mediumship abilities. You can also interchange soul abilities with synonymous term modes. Let's break it down. Just want to go back to that first sentence here. How you work directly with energy and messaging. But isn't that the soul senses? Is my son already here? I hope not. I got stuff to do. No. So soul senses is the information. Soul abilities is how you're retrieving it. Does that make sense? So where the different senses I have are directing information to certain parts of my brain. The soul, I'm thinking this real hard here. The soul senses are doing that same kind of thing. The soul abilities are how we designate where the information comes from. As I venture further into this understanding, I think this stuff is unnecessary to break down. Because how you're getting the information really doesn't matter. I think it matters for some people to be able to define where it's coming from. But in the end, it's the information that shows the truth, right? So when we talk about intuitive abilities, we're talking about the communication with the higher self. So this is your reception received from you. Okay. Intuition uses soul senses for direct translation of energy. Think of it as your own first person account of receiving information that filters only through you. It is a direct link to your higher self to navigate life towards happiness. It is also utilized in reading, analyzing, and assessing energy. This ability is the keystone for using the other soul abilities, the common language that sets you up to understand the other modes and utilize with the other abilities as well. To me, intuitive abilities is the super duper huge foundation for all the soul abilities. I think of it like what was the first organism on Earth? What was it? I don't know. That is what intuitive abilities are. From that, you have evolution of the other abilities. Psh, psh, psh. The other thing to understand about the abilities, and it's going to come up here in psychic, is what the information is also defines it. What kind of ability it is. Psychic abilities use soul senses to tap into information about an event or outcome that happened in the past or an event that will happen in the future. This ability is defined by when information takes place and that you are the source that is tapped into this information. So both intuitive and psychic abilities are first person understanding of information. I'm going to put it that way. Psychic is a way of taking in information that has happened in the past or in the future. It's time travel. That's what it is. Space travel, time travel. It's how you navigate through the universe. This is psychic. Mediumship uses the soul senses to connect with an entity, such as someone who was here on Earth but passed away, referred to as a discarnate or a soul without a body. This entity uses your experiences and references you've already developed. Like I said, that reference library you've created throughout your life in this physical body. This entity uses your experiences and references you've already developed as messages for you to interpret using your soul senses. This ability centers on receiving information via another entity or a secondhand source. So quite often with mediumship, and I'm still feeling this one out. I feel like how I understood mediumship was how people told me mediumship was. But as I navigate it and understand how other people talk about mediumship, my evolution of what mediumship actually is kind of changing. So the traditional thought of mediumship is someone died and you're tapping into that entity. The the person that you knew here on earth. So that's a simplified version of what mediumship is. I'm talking to someone who died, right? Talking to dead people. Another way I like to think about mediumship is more or less that I'm tapping into an energy of information. That's a part of an individual's experience, personality, that was here on the earth plane. How much they are a whole self is something to explore at a later time. Something really interesting to think about is that I am just a piece of a whole, and that there's more to me that is floating around the universe than just this person in a body. Like, I am multifaceted. I could be reincarnated. A piece of me could be reincarnated and existing in an old man in India right now. You know, that is not the direct link of me in this identity, but it is part of my higher self. So my higher self has fractions that come off of this and that belong to other people that could be walking this earth or helping other people as spirit guides or whatever. Isn't that crazy? What? Ah! Okay, I'm going to stop there. I just want you to understand that. Healing abilities. I never want to go into healing abilities, talking about it like I know anything. What I am aware of, and I have experienced for myself, is healing abilities is the intention of moving energy very subtly, realigning energy. Okay? Intentional thought to analyze and direct energy. All right. Think that's what I'm going to say about soul abilities for now. We'll talk about source, and then we're going to wrap it up. Source. From a beginner's standpoint, you may think it's my responsibility to sell you on what controls the whole spiritual soul world. Honestly, I don't focus too much on that, on what source, God, spirit, or the divine is, what it does, or how it does it. The source is a concept you will create as part of your truth. What is important about source is your own personal connection to it and trust in it. Acknowledging its presence, having gratitude for its direction, and trusting in its intentions for your betterment and well-being can lead to a much more harmonious and happier life for you. Trust it. There's not much I wanted to add in the guide with this topic because what you grow to understand of source is yours to develop and create. From a very young age, I always had a thing about religion and not a positive thing about religion. And this is something I bring into my spirituality with understanding my bias, but also understanding that I'm more open to wanting to know the truth than perpetuating a viewpoint. Because my reflection of religion was based off of the negative experiences I've had with religion. And that's not fair if there really is a God. You know what I mean? And that was humans creating that experience for me. So now, playing with your soul abilities, walking into that spiritual world, it's your experience that develops who or what is in control of everything. The other thing to add in is even if we could see it, we wouldn't understand it. Even if we were imparted with all the knowledge of what source is, where it is, how it works, Humans are incapable of understanding it. Why do you say that, Sarah? You don't think a lot of humans. Humans aren't set up to experience things in the kaleidoscope of understanding that is available. We understand things we have the capability of understanding this much because of our brains, because of our preconceptions, our perceptions. But in the grand scheme of all there is to know, like, it's much, much greater than what I believe humans are capable of understanding. There's what we limit ourselves to, but then there's what we can physically perceive and what we are intellectually capable of accepting as information. What we take in as truth is more of a scientific based understanding. And we're getting to a point where we don't have the instrumentation to measure because we don't know what we're measuring for. And I think seems like we may be having a change pretty soon with that, but it might take decades for us to catch up and really get our brains wrapped around what we actually have uncovered. But we'll get there. I don't think I'm going to see much of a change in my lifetime, but it doesn't mean that I can't contribute to having people discover something that I think is pretty amazing and that I'm pretty grateful for. So, source, that's going to be something for you to develop. That's going to be for you to name, for you to have a visualization of, for you to have an understanding of. I think in the end, however, everyone's understanding of source is going to be pretty friggin' similar because it's so broad to understand. I think it's also feeling. It's emotion, an emotional feeling. But I don't care because I'm too busy doing things. I acknowledge it. I'm aware it's here. Just like I acknowledge my guides and I say, hey, what's up? Do I know each of their faces? Nope. Do I know their names? Nope. I go to them and I say, okay, what's next? What am I doing wrong? Why am I feeling like I'm stuck? Why do I feel like I'm working, and I'm not really getting anything out of it? What am I getting out of it that I'm not recognizing? You know, that'd be good to ask my guides. So how you believe source, how you believe it now, and how it transforms once you start understanding your soul abilities, seeing them, that could be an evolution, and it could be changing your whole life. Once you get into this stuff, you got to get used to evolution, constant change. And you get comfortable with it after a while. And then things aren't such a big deal when things go wrong because you're so used to pivoting. Doesn't mean it doesn't get annoying sometimes, because sometimes it does. So that's where we're going to end today. Next time, we're going to get into meditation basics. This is good stuff. And we're going to do a meditation. So I got to plan a meditation for you. I think we'll do a white light meditation. Excuse me. Peppers. Maybe I'll throw another one in there too, so we can do a couple at a time. So that was today's chat. Next time we'll talk about meditation. And then we'll go through the steps. Right? Yeah, we're going to go through the steps. That imagination one, that might be a whole episode. Good stuff. Okay, so that does it for today. Watch out next week for the next episode. And until then, have a great week. And start take the week to really think about the experiences you've had. I said that really Canadian, didn't I? About the experiences you've had that were what you think were psychic or medium or strange or unusual. And think about which clairs that could be associated with and what and where the information was coming from. And another way to say that is which soul abilities were being used. And something to think about and kind of roll around in your head as we go forward. And just have it in your periphery. Okay? All right. Have a great week, and I'll chat with you a week from now.